Welcome to the endocrine system. There's a couple of things we're going to cover in this particular session. So by the end of it, you should be able to describe the role of the endocrine system, recognize the location, structure, and function of the endocrine glands in the body, be able to describe the main functions of hormones in the body, and explain the lifestyle factors that affect endocrine health. So, what does the term homeostasis mean, and what roles does the endocrine system play in maintaining homeostasis? So, you may have heard the term homeostasis in a couple of other lectures that we've covered, but it means balance. And particularly with the endocrine system, what we're actually looking to do is control the balance of hormones, which answers the second point there. What is the endocrine system? It is our body's hormone system. So, like the nervous system, which sends electrical messages to the brain, the endocrine system will send chemical messages to the brain. And it does this in order to release or stop the release, should we say, even of different hormones in the body. So if a level of one is too high, it will release another one to lower it. If one is too low, it will release another one to increase it. So, the structure of the endocrine system. The endocrine system is what we call a slow speed regulator of the body that uses chemical messengers known as hormones to communicate instructions to the cells of the body. And they're produced by specific organs in the body that we call endocrine glands. And for the moment, don't necessarily worry if you don't remember the names of these, because we will bring up a diagram a little bit later on that shows you where these are. But to give you a bit of an idea, the first three there, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the pineal gland, these are all located in the brain. The pancreas and the thyroid are organs associated with the endocrine system. We then have the parathyroid gland, the adrenal gland, and then you've got your testes and your ovaries. So, how do they work? We have target cells and receptors all over the body. So, in order to ensure that a hormone affects the right cell, which we call a target cell, there are specific receptors around the body that work like a lock and key. So, imagine you've got these millions and millions of receptors all over your body. Each of those will be assigned to one particular hormone as such. So let's just say somebody who is diabetic, their blood sugar is a little low. So you've got these hormones floating around the body. Let's just say your blood sugar finds a receptor that is specific to blood sugar. What you'll see on the image there is the hormone meeting the receptor, and it slots in like a key. That will then trigger the release of a message to say we need more sugar to bring these levels back up. If you look at the little image on the right, a blood sugar hormone floating around the body, if it finds the wrong receptor, so say a receptor whose only function is to deal with calcium levels, it will bounce off of it until it finds the receptor that is specific for its function. So we will only be able to send these messages when the right hormone finds the right receptor. So they're like unique keys that only work with specific locks. So to give you a bit of an idea here, let's start with the top bit. So stimulated glands with internal secretion excreted hormones directly into the bloodstream, at which point hormones go through the blood and travel to the target cells. Once they've found that lock and key, that target cell that they need, the hormone recognizes the target cell, and then the organ responds to the hormone and releases either more or slows the release, depending on what the message was that was received by the receptor. So to show you in another little diagram here, so there's chemical changes in the blood. So your blood sugar has dropped. So hormonal secretion is going to occur. The body's going to start releasing more glucagon into the blood to bring those sugar levels up. So there's then going to be a response to the target tissue. So then we get a rising level of hormones or effects of hormones that inhibit further release. At which point, let's say a receptor's gone along again now, and it's gone, oh, do you know what? Blood sugar is now perfect. We don't need any more. So there's going to be another chemical change in the blood where we stop the release of sugar because we're now at the level that we want it to be. Because the whole purpose of this is to create that homeostasis and have the correct balance. So we have this as what we call a positive and a negative feedback loop. So a positive feedback loop is when we're increasing the output to the tissue. So we're increasing the sugar as an example. The negative feedback loop is the decrease in the output. So we're now slowing the release of sugar down and stopping it because we've reached the level we want to. To give you an idea now of where these glands are located, we've got a diagram here for you. So it's worth taking a quick screenshot of this, or maybe drawing it out yourself, labeling it. The only one that's not on there that I want you to make a note of is the parathyroid. So you can see the thyroid gland just in the throat. The parathyroid actually sits directly on the back of that. So let's go through these glands and what their functions are on an individual basis now. So we have the hypothalamus. What I want you to imagine is your hypothalamus is like the CEO of all of the glands. So his job is to kind of bark the orders out and tell all the others what to release and things like that. So release from the hypothalamus is stimulated by growth hormone. So we need growth hormone in order to grow during like our adolescent stage, but as adults for general repair and recovery. Growth hormone is produced and secreted by the pituitary gland. The primary function is to stimulate growth in children and adolescents. And as I mentioned, we produce it in low amounts during adulthood because we only need it for recovery and repair. So it's important to note from this slide here that the pituitary gland is what produces and secretes it, but it's the hypothalamus that tells it and stimulates it to release it. So growth hormone in general, production is going to peak around every 3 to 5 hours, and it's triggered by multiple things. So if we go to sleep, that's going to trigger the release of growth hormone because we're in our recovery state, so it tries to focus on repairing as much as possible while we're sleeping. Exercise, because the body sees exercise as a threat, because we're potentially injuring muscles to allow them to grow bigger. We're putting the body through its paces, so it needs growth hormone to be released, and also through stress and low blood sugar as well. So it plays a very important role in post-exercise recovery. Now moving over to the thyroid. The thyroid releases a hormone called thyroxine, which is a pro-hormone produced and secreted by the thyroid gland, which gets converted into its active form called tridothyronine in organs such as the liver and kidneys. Generally speaking, a smaller amount, around 20% of the body's tridothyronine, is secreted directly from the thyroid gland. And the role of this is to control our metabolic rate, so our metabolism. It does have other functions such as helps with brain development, muscle control, digestion and bone maintenance. But the one thing we need to make sure is that we have got a diet sufficient in iodine, because iodine is what helps to produce this thyroxine, and we're going to get that from fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, like lots of leafy greens and things like that. So it's important to make sure you're trying to get as much fruit and vegetables in your diet as possible, because all of that is going to help contribute towards having a stable metabolism. When your metabolism is not stable, so somebody whose metabolism is too fast or maybe too slow, there's actual conditions associated with this. Hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. And generally speaking, hyperthyroidism is when you have a fast metabolism. And we often think, when people have got fast metabolism, you're so fortunate, you're skinny, whatever it is. But actually, there's a lot of downsides to it. Because what's actually happening is they're struggling to kind of gain weight because it's too fast all the time. They can be prone to heat intolerances, heart palpitations and arrhythmias, also tiredness and tremors, because their body is working faster than the average person. So everything internally is sped up and it's working harder. So actually they're going to tire a lot quicker. And like I say, it is hard for them to put on weight and things like that. So it's not always a good thing. Then you've got hypothyroidism. So this is when it's too slow and actually it's hard to lose weight. And it's considered an autoimmune attack. And the symptoms of this is in adults is again fatigue, cold intolerances this time, brachycardia, so heart conditions, often weight gain because it's hard to lose the weight. That can then lead to things like depression and also muscle stiffness as well. And then I mentioned we have a parathyroid, which sits directly on the back of the thyroid glands. The sole role of this is to manage calcium and magnesium levels in the blood now. So it's the goal of this is to regulate those levels to get them to where they need to be. So as an example, during muscle contractions when you're training, your body needs more calcium. It needs more calcium if you injure or break a bone. So the release of that would then be triggered to send it to the areas for that recovery, the repair, or the muscle contractions that are taking place. So it's why it's so important that we try to ensure that our diets have enough calcium and magnesium in them, which is then also going to reduce the risk later on in life of things like osteoporosis. Okay, corticosteroids. So cortico is cortisol. So the steroid hormone produced in the outer layer cortex of the adrenal glands are collectively known as corticosteroids. And cortisol is the main corticosteroid. Almost every cell in the body is going to have a receptor for this because cortisol is known as your stress hormone. So everywhere in the body has a receptor for this because if the heart is under stress, or if a particular muscle is under stress, or an organ, the body needs to know. So we've got these receptors all over the body, and when the body is under stress, the body will release corticosteroids, or known as cortisol, to try to alleviate these. The levels of cortisol are going to rise and fall in a predictable rhythm every kind of 24 hours or so. And it's released and controlled by what we call the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, so the HPA axis. All that means is that the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands are working collectively to release cortisol. And we release this to physical stresses such as activity, exercise, illness, injury, and even psychological issues such as anxiety and depression. But it's not always a good thing. In the short term, yes, cortisol increases the body's resilience and prepares it for action as part of your fight or flight response. So in a short-term situation, releasing cortisol is going to help you manage and deal with those situations. However, if this stress persists and high levels of cortisol production are sustained due to an imbalance in that HPA axis, this can actually start to suppress the immune system, which is then going to lead to higher risks of, say, organ failure, chronic medical conditions, heart attacks, strokes, which is why they say stress is the silent killer. So it's important that if you are constantly stressed, you're in an environment that is causing you physical and mental pain, it's important to try and step away from that, maybe take some holiday, take some time off to recover, because we need to get those cortisol levels back down to get our immune system functioning again so we can recover. Okay, adrenaline and noradrenaline, also known as epinephrine and norepinephrine. These hormones are known collectively as what we call catecholamines due to their chemical structure. And what they do is they work in tandem now with cortisol as part of that fight or flight response. So adrenaline and noradrenaline, their job is to increase the heart rate, the blood pressure, your breathing rate, and to divert blood away from basically the skin, internal organs, and to send it to the brain and your muscles. And what it does this as part of that fight or flight response. So, give you an example. You step out into the road, realize a bus is coming. This system is going to kick in. It's going to dump you full of adrenaline. And the reason it sends the blood to your brain and your limbs rather than your organs is so that you can think quickly in that moment and you can move quickly in that moment to try and get yourself out of that situation as quick as possible. And lastly now, moving over to the pancreatic hormones. So I gave some examples earlier about the blood sugars. Pancreatic hormones are responsible for managing blood sugar, especially for those with diabetes. So there's two particular hormones. We have insulin and glucagon that are secreted from the pancreas, and they share a role in managing blood sugar levels. So if your blood sugar is low, your body is going to release glucagon, which is sugar, which is energy, into the bloodstream. If those levels become too high, the one thing we can use to counteract that is insulin. So insulin is going to lower those levels back down. So it depends on which type of diabetes you have, but either you're going to need to inject insulin because you don't produce enough and you need to bring the blood sugars down, or alternatively, you might need to consume more sugar, such as a sweet drink or a chocolate, to bring your levels back up. But in the ideal situation, somebody who's not got diabetes, these levels should be managed by the body itself as long as you have a healthy, balanced diet. So hopefully, at the end of endocrine system there, you're now able to describe the role of what the endocrine system is as a chemical messenger, recognize the location, structure, and functions of the endocrine glands in the body, describe the main functions of the hormones in the body, and explain the lifestyle factors that affect endocrine health.